Anthony Grasso here, providing you financial news you can use. In this video, we're going to go over the $600 checks on when you should expect to receive them and break down a little bit more of what's in the stimulus package. So let's get right into it. All right, so let's bring this up here. So I put this all together from last night's talks in the bill. Now, the bill text isn't officially out yet for the next couple hours, but we can go over when to expect your stimulus check. So as we can see here, the second stimulus checks will be $600 per person and $600 per child for $166 billion total. Now, when will this second stimulus checks arrive? Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said today that the first batch of payments could go out as of the beginning of next week. That is faster than in the spring, where it took about 2 weeks after the legislation was signed. The legislation is supposed to be signed as of today. The first batches may also be larger in the spring. That is because the government now has more information about groups that got later payments in the first round, including those who typically don't file tax returns and those who receive federal benefits. Those who receive paper checks instead of direct deposits will have to wait longer. Now, how much will the payments be? And now, as I said, $600 per adult, $600 per child. Now that's down from $1,200 from the first and then from the first round. That means a single parent with 2 children will now get $1,800 after receiving $2,200 approximately in the spring. Now, what about the income limits? Now, they'll start phasing out with adjusted gross income of exceeding $75,000 when the head of household's income exceed $112,000, and when income for married couples filing jointly exceeds $150,000. That is generally based upon the 2019 income that you have. Now, you might say, well, what if my income or family size has changed? Well, as with the first round, households that qualify for a larger benefit based on their 2020 income can claim the difference between what they received and what they should have received. They can do that on their 2020 tax return. The IRS typically starts allowing tax filing in late January and makes refund payments within a few weeks of receiving returns. So if you get too much money, is the payment taxable? Now, the payments are not taxable income. There are increases in the tax refund that you would normally receive, like in early 2021, and an early payment of that. If you get too much money on that one hand, which could happen if you qualify based on the 2019 income and your 2020 income was too high to get paid, you don't have to pay back the difference. Now, are college students and adult dependents eligible? No, that is out of this bill. Only children younger than 17 are expected to be eligible. And now let's say if you don't have a social security number. Now, this is a change from the first set of payments. People without social security numbers, often unauthorized immigrants typically, they're still not eligible, but their presence in a married couple doesn't make their entire household ineligible. So if you're married and one has ITN number and one does not, while such mixed status households can get payments this time based on the number of eligible people in the household, in contrast to the spring when they couldn't get any money at all. And this change is retroactive, so they can claim an amount for the first payment as part of the 2020 tax return. Now let's go into the unemployment benefits right here. Now, the jobless will receive $300 weekly federal enhancement for benefits for about 11 weeks from the end of December through mid-March under this deal. The amount is half of the earlier federal boost, which ran out in July, which was $600 a week. Also, the agreement calls for extensions of 2 other pandemic unemployment programs that were created in the CARES Act in March. Now, both of those are currently set to expire at the end of this week, affecting probably 12 million people. So it's going to be not retroactive. It's going to start at the end of December. The Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program that expands jobless benefits to gig workers, freelancers, independent contractors, self-employed, and certain people affected by the coronavirus. The Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation Program provides an additional 13 weeks of payments to those who exhausted their regular state benefits. So the regular state benefits now will be extended an additional 13 weeks. So that initially, when I said like the base of that unemployment was 40 billion, that was to expand the pandemic unemployment assistance. Now, both programs could close to new applicants in mid-March and then phase out in early April for existing claimants. The final agreement is less generous than the original bipartisan deal that was released earlier this month, because we know that that was 16 weeks of enhanced payments and pandemic benefits. So it's and there's possibly going to be a third package when Biden takes office. Now let's go into the small business loans over here. So as you can see here, the Paycheck Protection Program that has some of the hardest hit businesses, they were given an additional $284 billion. This program stopped taking applicants for the first round of loans back in August. It's specifically designed $12 billion from minority-owned and very small businesses. Unlike in the CARES Act, this bill carves out about $15 billion for live venues, independent movie theaters, and cultural institutions. It also expands eligibility to more nonprofits, as well as for local newspapers, TV, and radio broadcasters. There's also funding in this bill for schools and childcare. There's going to be $82 billion in aid for K-12 schools and colleges. The earlier proposals from Republicans and Democrats called for at least $100 billion in aid for schools, and an additional $10 billion is included for support for childcare providers that have struggled because of the pandemic as well. Now, let's go on to the rental assistance. Now, the eviction moratorium has been extended to January 31st for that's when it's going to expire. It also provided an additional $25 billion in rental assistance for individuals who lost their source of income during the pandemic, and that's going to be retroactive as well. Now, nutrition assistance, the deal would raise the SNAP benefits by about 15% for 6 months, but would not expand eligibility. The initial plans were calling for $26 billion. Now they landed at $13 billion. So this is still more. The $13 billion is still more than what was called for back in the previous CARES Act. This is more generous than the original bipartisan agreement from earlier in December, which called for a 4-month increase. Now, Democrats have advocated for augmenting the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, which we call SNAP, as food stamps are formerly known since the pandemic began. But the provision never made it to the prior relief packages. The bill also will expand the pandemic EBT program to families for children under the age of 6, deeming them enrolled in childcare or eligible for benefits. It now provides money to low-income families with school-age children in lieu of the free and reduced price meals that they would have received in school. The deal also sent $400 million to food banks and food pantries through the Emergency Food Assistance Program. It also provides $175 million for nutritional services for seniors, such as Meals on Wheels, $13 million for the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, which serves more than $700,000 older Americans monthly. Now, with vaccines, this agreement will provide about $20 billion for the purchase of vaccines so they can be available at no charge, as well as another $8 billion for vaccine distribution. It also gives states $20 billion to assist with testing, so that number increased significantly in this bill. Now let's go over what's not in the bill. So what's not in the bill, let's scroll down here, is lawsuit protections and state and local government funds. The final deal does not contain those direct aids, which it dropped for initial $160 billion, and I said initially they broke out the $900 billion plan for $748 billion, and then broke out the $160 billion. But that's probably going to be negotiated. They spoke. It's going to be negotiated over the next couple of months. House Democrats had provided for $875 billion in the relief bill, the HEROES Act that passed the chamber in May, but never went anywhere at all. But Republicans have resisted allocating additional funds beyond the $150 billion provided by Congress's $2 trillion in relief bill back in March in the CARES bill, which could only be used for coronavirus-related expenses. Now, GOP lawmakers have said that they don't want the bailout states to have mismanaged their finances. State and local officials blasted lawmakers in recent days when it became clear that direct aid was falling by the wayside. Now, let's come back here. So, in a joint statement last night, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer pointed out that the final agreement would provide emergency resources for schools, $27 billion for state highways, struggling transit agencies, Amtrak, and airports, and $22 billion for health-related expenses of state and local, tribal, and territorial governments. In addition, the agreement calls for an additional $2 billion support intercity buses. The deal would also extend the deadline for spending down the $150 billion in coronavirus relief funds by the end of the year. State and local governments have been racing to use all the money by the current deadline of December 30th, which many providing assistance to residents. State and local officials have asked to be able to use some of the funding to plug budget shortfalls, and that's where the Republicans disagree. So that is your stimulus update as of December 21st, 2020 at 12:30 p.m. I'm waiting for the final legislative text to come out in the next couple hours so we can review it, make sure and adjust our spreadsheets and see if anything slightly changed from the numbers that were reported from last night to today. So this is good news. We're going to be getting our unemployment benefits. We're going to be getting our stimulus checks. So stay tuned for the next video. I'm going to be updating what the progress is on the state of the stimulus negotiations going forward into the next package, and all the news for stimulus updates as of today. So if you like this video, smash that like button down below, and consider subscribing if you like financial news and market news that can benefit you. Ciao.